Okay, so we're continuing in the what I entitled Mezonot or HaMotzi, right? This was the topic that we were discussing.
In
But
progress.
before we go in, I would appreciate that. Shkoyach. Before we continue in our halachot and mezonot or hamotzi, I wanted to take a look at the machshava on page 284, the thoughts about saying a bracha. This thought comes from Harav Yosher Ber Soloveitchik, Tzadik the bracha, Rosh Yeshiva Shavin Yitzchak Elchanan, and it's in the English on source 42 on the bottom. I know I'm skipping the Sefer HaChinuch on the top, but I think source 42 really speaks volumes. Listen to this. Listen to what Soloveitchik said. When one recites a blessing over food, for example, he's essentially saying, Master of the universe, you are hidden behind a cloud. No one sees you. Right? Maybe that goes back to the Mishnah we learned today. Right? You have to know. You have to know what's on top of you. No one sees you. Yet, as I eat this food, I reveal your presence. The very idea that I can eat, that my body absorbs food, that I can digest. In fact, the entire biological process underlying my consumption of food, and indeed the very creation of food itself, all attests to your presence. They all are witnesses that you are there. Through this recognition, when I'm saying my bracha and understanding all this is a miracle from Hashem, I'm removing the obscuring cloud, the cloud that's blocking. I am revealing you. That is the essence of a bracha. Blessings are addressed to God in the second person. Baruch atah. Blessed are you, Hashem. We're speaking directly to him. Blessed are you, rather than in the blessed is he. We're not saying blessed is Hashem, but blessed are you, Hashem. Why? In order to affirm God's very presence before us. You understand what we're doing? He says every time he's saying Baruch atah, Baruch atah, Baruch Hashem. Hashem, you are right here. I'm blessing you. You're here. I see you. By eating this food, I recognize you. So you understand what it means to say a bracha now? It's a whole, a lot of times you think a bracha is like, oh, it's a heter for me now to eat. I said it, I can go. No, when you're saying the bracha, it's you're recognizing that Hashem's yad, Hashem's hand is in this world. It's everywhere. Is if one says, where are you, God? And you say, you are right here with me. How do I know? Because your presence is evident in this food that I'm about to eat. The purpose, says Rav Soloveitchik, of a bracha is to transform the hidden into presence, to know from what's hiding, to put it into reality. It's not hidden anymore. And through use of the second person singular, we reveal the divine presence directly in front of us. A Jew is thus a partner in the revelation of God every time he recites a bracha. I think this is an amazing idea of what it means to make a bracha, is to really understand that I'm saying that Hashem is right here, and He is providing me with this. I remember once in my father's shul, before we continue the halachot, in my father's shul, I remember, Avi, I don't know if you were there that day. My father was asking, like, where is Hashem? Like, how can a person see Hashem? He was saying, if a person looks into the world, he'll see Hashem. So one guy says, no, if you look in the world, you'll see everything's made in China. The table's made in China, chair was made in China, everything's made in China, right? That was the guy's thing. And he got a klitschka then. He got a nickname, China Man. Everyone started calling him China afterwards. But the idea is that sometimes it's hidden. The world, everything looks like it's coming from China. Everything looks like Hashem is not there. But that's the Jew. The Jew takes the food and says, wait, where did this food come from? Who made this food? How did it come to be such a beautiful fruit? How did it come to be such a beautiful, tasty thing? This is God's hand in it. Baruch atah Hashem. Amazing machshava. All right. Now that we get a little about machshava, let's go back to page 281. 281 in the Tzurba, volume 13. As we continue in what we call Pat HaBa'a Bekisnin. So these are foods, bread that come as, we'll translate it as sweet or desserts. Now we're going to be dealing with the Tzurat HaPat, the form of bread. Form of bread. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's start with the Gemara. Source 35. Amar Rav Yosef. Hi chavitza. This chavitza, It's a certain type of dish. We're going to see it's a machloket Rashi Tosa what this dish is. Rashi seems to say that it's a cooked dish, where Tosot says it's a dish which flour and liquid are mixed together without cooking or baking. Okay, so let's just take a look. HaChavitza, the 8 be'rurin kezayit that have pieces that are kezayit. Okay, so you have kezayit pieces of some sort of bread. I'm not entirely sure what it is yet. What do you say? So betchila mivarech alav HaMotzi lechem min ha'aretz. If it's kezayit pieces, you're going to say HaMotzi lechem. Ulb'soif mivarech alav shosha berachot. And then you'll say Birkat HaMazon afterwards, right? Because Birkat HaMazon originally was 3, and then a 4th bracha was added on. Now, the led be'pirurin kezayit, if it doesn't have a kezayit, meaning the bread, whatever this bread is less than kezayit pieces, right? Kezayit, we said, is 27 grams. So less than a kezayit pieces. First you say borei minei mezonot, and then you'll say al hamichya. So you can have the exact same food, the Gemara says. You can have the exact same food in front of you. If it's kezayit pieces, you're going to have to say HaMotzi and make Birkat HaMazon afterwards. And if it's less than kezayit pieces, then you can make a Mezonot and say al hamichya. Malkiel, you had a question?
Yeah, you did from page 277, or that's going to be like skipped?
277. Yeah, we did it at the end of last week.
We did it.
Yeah.
Till 280. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Okay.
did till 280. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay. We did it. We did do it a little bit faster than usual, but we did do it.
Oh.
We did do it.
That's right.
Yeah, I was trying to catch up time last time. Okay, so this is the idea. This is chavitza. Chavitza is some sort of bread. We're not sure what it is. If it's kezayit pieces, it's HaMotzi. Less than kezayit, it's Mezonot. We don't know what we're talking yet about, so let's see. So my Havi'allah. Now the question the Gemara says in source 36. What was the halacha? What do they say? Is halacha like Rav Yosef? So Amar Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet says, "Ha-chavitza afagav deleis be'perun kezayit." Even if it's less than a kezayit, it's still going to get a HaMotzi. Not like the original Gemara said. So this second Gemara says, this chavitza is always HaMotzi. Amarava Rava says, as long as it looks like bread. Meaning, if it doesn't look like bread, then it's Mezonot. If it looks like bread, then it's HaMotzi.
So when you're not sure, like if it's apple juice or with water, that's what you're not sure with?
No, there was a different story. This now is chavitza. We're not sure what chavitza is. We'll figure it out in a minute. It's some side of bread. The first Gemara said if it's kezayit pieces, HaMotzi. Less than kezayit, Mezonot. Second Gemara said, no, that's not the halacha. Whether it's a kezayit or not, still HaMotzi. Rava said, only HaMotzi if it still looks like bread. This is what we have so far. Okay, so now we have to build it a little further. So I told you, Rashi said it's a cooked dish. Tosafot on page 282, source 37, he says, "Nerali chavitza hainu purin hanidvakim yochad al yidei merek al yidei chalav kemo chavitza the tamre shehein nidvakim." Tosafot says, you know what it is? These are like crumbs of bread, purin of bread, and they're stuck together. There's some sort of like a bread porridge. Imagine you've made a porridge out of bread, right? So that's what Tosfot says it is. What's the halacha? How do we learn this? So there is another Rishon, Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay, see when you have right in front of you the Yalkut Joseph English edition. I want you to open to page 303, I believe. Anyone who has it, it's really exactly what the Tzurba brings in the Shulchan Aruch. The Yalkut Yosef on page 303, where it says the preface, he explains it very nicely. It's the exact same thing that's in the Shulchan Aruch in source 38. I just want to take it from the Yalkut Yosef as he explains it a little bit more simpler. Tamid Rabbeinu Yonah commented on the topic of chavitza, and they said there are 3 types of chavitza, and they each get different type of halachas. So, A, is the halacha of boiled bread. This is the first thing, boiled bread, because Rashi was learning it as being boiled, bread that's being boiled. So the boiled bread depends entirely on the size of the piece. So if you ever take bread and you cook it, okay, for whatever reason, bagel, yes, bagel is a boiled bread. But that's right. It's actually regular bread because they throw it into the water for a moment, bagels, in order to make the crust around it. Then they bake it regularly, if I remember correctly, the process of a bagel. And the reason for that is you make the crust hard, then the inside becomes the bagel bread that it's very much together. It's very tight. The dough is very tight because of the crust. The dough when it bakes stays in a tight space. That's the idea of a bagel. But yeah, similar to that. But one second. If you have boiled bread, it all depends on the piece. If the piece of bread is a kezayin, then it is definitely a HaMotzi, even if it doesn't look like bread. Okay, so here's the case. I have a piece of rye bread. I cut it in half. It's still HaMotzi. It still has the kezayin, 27 grams. Or I put the whole bread, the whole slice. I throw it into the boiling water. Once it's in the boiling water, it doesn't look like bread anymore. But it's still a kezayin piece. It's still going to be HaMotzi. Okay, that's one. Now, if all the pieces are smaller than a kezayin, then even if they still look like bread, they're no longer considered bread.
Put together, right? Small pieces put together, or
so
each individual?
I took the bread and I cut it up into small pieces. No single piece is a kezayin. All the pieces are smaller than a kezayin. And now I cook them. Okay? Now everything is going to be mezonot, even if they look like bread. Now, you're thinking, who's boiling bread? The truth is, this halacha applies to French toast if you're French toasting like cooking, which means deep frying. It has to be a lot of oil. It has to be considered like it's. We're going to see this today. We're going to move on to there. If you want to look at a practical example, it is French toast. What do you do with French toast? You take the bread, you dip it into, I don't know exact order, egg, milk, all right, cinnamon, vanilla, whatever you want to put in, but it's bread. It's originally bread. Now, if you take it and you cook it, right, and it still looks like bread, the whole slice, and it's a kezayin slice, it's going to be HaMotzi. You have to change its appearance for it to be mezonot. Or you can cut it up into small pieces, and there's no kezayin piece, and now you do with the French toast. And you're frying it as if cooking with a lot of oil, so it's all covered with oil. So then, according to everyone, it's considered cooking. And now you can eat all that bread as mezonot.
No restaurant to have a container of garlic.
Right. Okay. Are they recooking it?
No. They fry it with garlic and they put it in a bowl, make a HaMotzi.
They fry it?
They don't fry it. Just the oil and the garlic.
If they're not frying it, then it's not. If it's not being cooked, then it's not. Then it's just like smearing butter on bread. It's going to still be HaMotzi. Right. It has to be a recook. So that's A. Right? Rabbeinu Yonah says that's A, and that's the first piece in Shulchan Aruch. If you want to read it, that's the same idea that he says over here. If it's boiled bread, boiled means also cooked, means if it's a lot of oil. If it's a size of bread, a size of a kezayin, 27 grams, it's going to stay on HaMotzi. Even if the cooking has destroyed the bread look, it's going to stay HaMotzi. But if its pieces are smaller than kezayin, then even if they still look like bread, they are no longer considered bread. That's A. Okay, moving on to B. If someone crumbled the bread and then formed bowls of crumbs held together with honey or broth, but he did not cook the bread, right? This is Tosfos explanation of chavitza. It again depends on the sizes of the pieces. So this is the case. You took the bread, you form bowls of crumbs, and then you hold them together with honey and broth. Okay? The pieces are as large as a kezayin. The proper bracha is HaMotzi. But if the pieces are smaller than a kazayit, it depends on their appearance. If they still appear like bread, the blessings are HaMotzi and Birkat Hamazon. But if they do not resemble bread, the proper bracha is Borei Minei Mizon. Okay? Someone crumbled the bread and then formed balls of crumbs. Okay? And then he makes them. What can be an example of this? Perhaps, what? Matzah balls. Croutons also could be example, depends how finely they made them. Okay? So matzah balls, croutons, is something that they break it down, the bread, it was originally bread, break it down, they make it into something. Matzah balls actually bread, and
It's not bread, it's matzah. It was always mezonot.
for us, matzah is mezonot. For them, Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be HaMotzi, so they'll have this into play. Now, sometimes they don't recook the matzah ball. Some places they bake the matzah balls. Right? That's another issue. Yeah, they bake them. They don't cook them. So then that's still going to be HaMotzi, because most matzah balls are probably a kazayit. Probably 27 grams if you weigh them out, the bigger ones at least. Okay, so if in that case, if the matzah ball is 27 grams, it's still HaMotzi.
So when you say it looks, when you see something in the clear glass jar, bread inside, this is what HaMotzi. If you see bread, let's say bread pudding. If you look in the glass, it looks bread inside.
Pieces of bread that was stuck together with eggs. So you make it.
So is it now the pieces that are when it's stuck together? Is it a kazayit? So I'm understanding that it means it's stuck together.
Yes.
So then it's going to be HaMotzi.
You have 1 pound of
And it still looks like bread. And it still looks like bread.
But it's covered with the cream.
That's fine.
But you see it in the glass.
But it still looks like bread. If it still looks like bread, then it's HaMotzi. If it doesn't look like bread, then it'll be Mezonot.
Cream and cinnamon.
Oh, we make it different. It's like bread pudding that we make, like the stuffing. Stuffing for the Thanksgiving meal that they have. We take the challah.
Yeah. So let's read the actual halacha. And Yaakov Yosef 43, page 306. The bread is not boiled, but someone placed small pieces in a bowl, and they became fused together with honey or hot broth. The halacha depends on the size of the original pieces. If the original pieces are as large as a kazayit, page 306, the blessing remains HaMotzi. If they are smaller than a kazayit, it depends on how they look. If they resemble bread, the proper blessing are HaMotzi and Birkat Hamazon. If they do not resemble bread, the proper blessings are Borei Minei Mezonot and Al Mechya. Even if someone eats an entire meal's worth of them, meaning there's no Kviat Suda at this. Okay, so see, this is how complicated the blessings get. All right, so to review, you had bread, you crumble them, and now you're putting them together. If it's smaller than kazayit pieces, it all depends on how it looks. Looks like bread, it's going to be HaMotzi. Doesn't look like bread, it's Mezonot. If it's larger than kazayit pieces, it's going to stay HaMotzi. And the third one is someone broke bread into pieces, but they have not been cooked or glued together with any liquid. The proper blessing is HaMotzi, even if the pieces have been ground into a powder. It's still considered regular bread. Meaning you didn't do anything else to the bread. You didn't cook it. You didn't mix it with any liquid. You just took bread and breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs is HaMotzi.
So matzah ball made from bread also.
So that's liquid now. It's mixed with liquid, right? It's smushy. They put in eggs. They put in other stuff to make it mush. In that case, it depends if it's a kazayit or not. If it's bigger than a kazayit, the original crumbs, so then it'll definitely be HaMotzi. Matzah ball is not. It's more finely refined. So now it depends if it looks like bread or not. And most people will say matzah ball doesn't look like bread. Therefore, matzah ball will be mezonot. And even if you eat a whole suda of matzah balls, 216 grams of matzah balls, it will still remain mezonot. Okay? So far, so good. So this is what he brings here in the Shulchan Aruch. It's exactly what the Shulchan Aruch says in source 38, and he sums it up. He sums it up in that brown box in the bottom of 282. 3 categories: pieces of bread cooked together using liquid, pieces larger than a kazayit, HaMotzi, pieces smaller than a kazayit, Mezonot. 2 pieces of bread joined together using liquid but without being cooked. Pieces larger than a kazayit, HaMotzi. Pieces less than a kazayit. Then if they look like bread, they're HaMotzi. And if they do not look like bread, then they're Mezonot. 3 pieces of bread joined together without liquid or cooking is HaMotzi. Okay, so that is the sum of it. We got it? You want me to review it again? Or we're good. We want to move on. Okay. So the Mishnah Berurah talks about frying. Right? We talked about frying in the sense of French toast. Well, let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. If he did not cook them in a pot, but instead fry them in liquid in a pan, the Magen Avraham says that's not cooking. And therefore, it's going to stay HaMotzi. It's like joining together with liquid. That's all what you're doing. You're adding a liquid to it. So now it depends if it's a kazayit piece or not, and if it looks like bread or not, if it's less than a kazayit piece.
This should be taste like a bread or taste like.
Once you made bread, if you change the taste of the bread because you covered it with chocolate or something, it still stays HaMotzi. It doesn't change once the bread is made. It's if the bread was made with a different taste, then you go by
How
the taste.
come when you take a bread and it makes the mezonot?
So you're breaking it and you're recooking it or doing
I'm
something
putting
with
in a
it.
cereal, like milk,
So that's different.
Huh?
You're making the green tea and you put in the milk, right? So in that case, it's still going to be HaMotzi. You're just taking bread and you're eating it. Here we're saying you're repurposing it. You're doing something else with it. You're recooking it. You're making it into a bowl. You're doing something with it. Then the halacha changed. So the Mishnah Berurah said that frying is not cooking. And Tzion, if you open up the Yalkut Yosef to page 307, halacha 45, here he talks about frying bread. The poskim debated whether or not fried foods have the same halachic status as boiled foods. Therefore, if someone fries small pieces of bread in oil, the halacha regarding the proper blessing is uncertain. If they are considered cooked, it's borim and mezonot, right? Because they're less than a kazayit. If they're not considered cooked, then it's HaMotzi. So what to do? Some contemporary poskim say that fried foods is definitely the same as boiled foods. According to this, the proper blessing are definitely borim and mezonot, and shalosh. But deep frying is an act of cooking without question. If you're deep frying, that's considered cooking. Therefore, if someone deep fries bread, it depends entirely on the size of the piece. If it's bigger than a kazayit, it's HaMotzi. It's less than a kazayit, it's mezonot. If the bread is fried with very little oil, now how is French toast made? Is it deep fried or it's fried with a little bit of oil?
Oil. I don't know. To say deep fry.
Deep fry, by the way, I saw them on. They give the status of deep frying mean that the food is covered with oil. So if the food is not covered with oil, submerged in oil, right? If it's not submerged in oil, right? Shalpak is definitely is submerged in oil and it's cooked differently, right? It's fried. It's a fried dough. It's a different halacha. But you're right. It's looking at Mezonot.
In fact, if you're putting it with a batter, eggs, and all that, doesn't give it also a different entity?
Who? Which dough?
The French dough.
No, it's bread originally. You're taking real bread. And if I take real bread and I smear milk on it, does it change its bracha? And if I put egg on top of my bread, it doesn't stay HaMotzi?
Once you recooking it.
Recooking it. Reprocessing it, repurposing it. Right. So that's what we're saying. That's what we're saying. It depends.
Deep fried as opposed to.
So you're saying because the halacha is if it's cooked, right? Rashi says that chavitza is a cooked dish, right? So cooked means cooked. Now is light frying considered cooked? That's the machloket. That's the machloket poskim, right? They don't fry the French toast. What do they do with it? So it's not frying. So they're not cooking it. They're grilling it. So grilling it definitely won't change it. Grilling is roasting is not considered cooking at all. Even in Basar B'chalav, roasting has a whole different halachic status. It's a grilled toast. So I'll tell you how my mother made it. I'll tell you how my mother made it. My mother would take the bread, right, especially after Shabbat, Sunday mornings, right? Sunday morning, you had a lot of challah left over. She took the challah, a bunch of boys and girls at home to feed. So she cuts the challah into pieces, right? Cuts them into slices. Definitely kazayat a slice. She didn't make it smaller. Then she submerges it into milk. Then she put it into the eggs. We didn't like vanilla or we didn't like cinnamon and stuff like that. And then she would just take the frying pan, a little bit of oil, fry one side, fry the other side. And if you ask for some cheese, then she would take 2 slices and put a cheese in between and give you now French toast with cheese, melted cheese in the middle. It was very good. HaMotzi. HaMotzi. Because first of all, it's not submerged in oil, right? So it's not considered cooking, so it's not repurposed. And because it's not less than a kazayit, for sure it's a motzi. But even if it was less than a kazayit, right? Even if it was less than a kazayit, this is not considered cooking. If the bread is fried with very little oil, just enough to prevent the bread from burning and sticking to the pan surface, all posting read the bread is not considered cooked. Therefore, even if the pieces are smaller than a kazayit, as long as they still look like bread, their proper blessing would be HaMotzi. And French toast looks like bread. Okay, it looks like bread. I haven't seen French toast.
What is the flour cake flour? Is it the same flour or is it different? Same? Why do you say cake flour?
So very good. So he's talking about bread, like croutons. So Piskei Tshuvot deals with croutons. Look at the next piece. Emna Masha Motzi Bizmanenu Croutonim. You find these croutonim, okay? Who kubiot ketanot. They're small cubes of toasts, which are common in our time. Piskei Tshuvot says their bracha is borei minei Mezonot. One reason, as before the bread undergoes a process of drying and rebaking, they smear it with oil and various spices. Also, it's unusual to eat large quantities of it and establish a meal upon it. Right? This is again the Ashkenazic way of looking at a kriyat suda, that you establish a meal on this food. Moreover, it undergoes a process of frying in deep oil. Right, it's submerged, and in this way, and it's smaller than a kazayit piece for sure. So this way, croutons are definitely a mezonot.
So we're talking about the croutons. As far as I remember learning, regards to croutons, that it becomes mezonot is because originally when it was made for the purpose of croutons. In other words, the bread that was made, was not made for the purpose of challah and making the motzi, and it was made so they have croutons in a bag for you. Croutons used for salad.
So you are correct. You are correct.
Commercial.
If it's commercially created that way, then you are correct. All right. We had the same idea with toast. They took regular bread dough and they made it into toast. Right. If it's originally manufactured that way, then it gets a din of pat haba'a kisnin, the dry crunchy bread, and it gets a mezonot. But if it was originally made bread and now you toasted it, sometimes people do that. Right. Usually in the commercially, although I saw brought down here, they're saying that some companies actually do make them into a bread first and then change it into melba toast or stuff like that.
Chips.
Right.
What is the bracha on that?
Well, it depends. How is it made?
No, but if it's made, it's originally made for pita. But then they took it and they cut it up. And they said, oh, wait a second. It's a good selling item. Let's mass produce it.
So how do they mass produce it now?
Pita, but really, we're going to cut it up into pieces. And now we're going to sell it like that.
So you're saying the original intention is to get it to that?
Originally, it was leftover, like you say.
No. Forget how it got invented. Forget how it got invented. Right now, they're marketing it. How are they marketing it?
They're taking pita.
Chips.
Right. And what's the process? They cut it small and they right away.
They toast it.
But you're saying first they make it as a bread.
Toast it.
I like it.
It's like crackers. That's different.
Because they're making their own batch. I'm talking about Stacy's chips. You ever saw the bag of Stacy's chips?
I like that.
Stacy's chips.
You have cinnamon in there, topping.
Right. Stacy's chips. Those are pita chips. Okay, this is the most marketed one that I've seen. technically you can buy them because even though they're pat palter, you can't find a better Stacy chip, pita chip anywhere else. So that's the heter of the Shulchan Aruch. Right now it's Kemach Yoshin because it's after Pesach. So okay, Kemach has their own pita chips. Okay, so you have these pita chips. How are they made? Right? How are they made? If the process is straight to make them into dry thingies, then it can definitely be mezonot. If they're originally made as bread to serve as bread, and then they turn them into pita chips, then we run into a question. You have to go and figure out what they do there. To go and figure it out.
It was a big piece of bread broken into pieces, or actually
Meaning, when they make it, are they creating the bread first? Meaning that they take the dough, they bake it into bread. Now the bread comes out and sits as bread. Yeah, and now it's going into the second phase. Is that considered? I have a question there because what we said in the Alka Joseph, you have bread and then you turn it into toast. It stays HaMotzi. But here, what we're saying is the bread was never meant to become a bread. It's meant to become a pita chip. It just happens to be that on the process it becomes a bread. I can hear you saying it's a mezonot because that's the final product.
The same question was in regards to French toast, because French toast originally, the commercial ones, it comes as a loaf of bread, and they slice it, and they make it into a French toast, and they sell it by the boxes, right?
Where do you see French toast commercially? I've never seen.
Oh, okay. There is such thing.
There is such a thing. You're familiar with?
Many
It's like the frozen products.
Yeah, all the hotels they rather than sit down over there
They make their own French toast.
rather than making it
They're buying frozen French toast.
Yeah, they have it already done. So it originally comes as for commercial French toast, and that stays mezonot, even though it's big pieces, no? Because its intent was for the French toast, wasn't intent for HaMotzi.
I don't know. So this goes to that same question. That goes to that same question: is if I'm making something to get to something else, does that midpoint count for anything in halacha? Because that's not my intention to make. That is a good question. I'm not a poisek, so I can't tell you. I can just tell you it's a great question. It's actually a very good question. But that's the idea over here.
When I was sitting with the he said that when there's an intent
to go straight to the final product, it's going to be mezonot. Okay, so Rav Satka, who could say this, says that it is mezonot. So if the intention is to go to the final product straight, you just have to stop at a midpoint to make bread, then it would be mezonot, which makes sense because you never wanted to eat the bread, and wasn't the point to eat the bread. It's like if I'm making something in the kitchen, I'm going from point A to point B. I want to get to where I want to get. It's just the process of getting there. I could definitely hear that and it makes sense. So that is what we know. Let's turn for a moment in the Tzurba to page 318. 318. Okay. The reason why I'm turning to page 318 because this is exactly what we're dealing with right now. They bring it at the second shir again, so we're going to look at it here now. Pieces of bread cooked together using liquid. If they're cooked together, if it's larger than a kazayit, definitely HaMotzi. Less than a kazayit, mezonot. Right, that's the whole sugya of French toast. Pieces larger than a kazayit, if they're joined together with a liquid but not cooked, that's your matzah bowls. So if it's larger than a kazayit, HaMotzi. Pieces smaller than a kazayit, then if it looks like bread, it's HaMotzi. Doesn't look like bread, it's mezonot. If pieces of bread are joined together without liquid or cooking, even if you made them into a fine flour, it will stay a HaMotzi. Says the halachot of brachot, source number 34 here on page 318. Bread pieces which are larger than a kazayit are considered to be bread regardless of whether they were boiled, cooked, or fried. Therefore, the bracha for any product containing pieces of bread which are larger than a kazayit is HaMotzi. Okay, if I have a big piece of bread, if I fry it, if I cook it, whatever I do to it, a big piece of bread stays HaMotzi. That's it. Okay. For example, French toast, bread dipped in eggs and fried, made from a whole slice of bread, requires HaMotzi. Since it is larger than the size of a kazayit, it's definitely HaMotzi. French toast made with pieces smaller than a kazayit, but fried without oil or just a little bit of oil, requires HaMotzi and Birkat HaMazon. Frying without oil or a little bit of oil is like baking. Therefore, the bread remains a bread even though it's smaller than a kazayit. But French toast made with pieces smaller than a kazayit, and they're deep fried, meaning the bread is entirely covered by oil. Then it's borei min mezonot and ala michya. Deep frying is definitely considered cooking. Since the bread is smaller than a kazayit and it was cooked, it's no longer considered bread. And then you can make a mezonot on it. Okay. He says further on page 319, boiled bread crusts. Bread crusts boiled in soup require only mezonot if they're smaller than a kazayit. So you're cooking the breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs remain HaMotzi, but if you're cooking them and they're smaller, they're definitely a mezonot, right? Because they're getting cooked and they're smaller than a kazayit. Matzah bread. Okay, this is something we spoke about on Pesach. Matzah bread. What's matzah bread? Matzah is made from small pieces of matzot soaked in egg and fried in oil. This creates a questionable situation. Although the pieces of matzah are smaller than a kazayit, since they are fried and not boiled, one can recite a mezonot with certainty because they're fried. Therefore, one who eats matzah bread must recite a HaMotzi on a piece of bread beforehand. If ever the matzahs are soaked in water or oil and no longer recognizable matzot, the brachot is mezonot. So really, again, what we see over and over again is the repurposing, how we reuse the bread will make a difference in what the bracha of the bread will be. Okay, I wrote in the Yalkut Yosef Halacha 49 on page 309. Was that 304? Hold on a second. You have it in front of you over there. 309. Halacha 49. On Pesach, if someone spread a raw egg on the surface of a matzah and fried it in oil, as long as the matzah is large as a kazayit, HaMotzi. Same halacha regarding French toast. If the pieces are larger kazayit, it's considered regular bread. HaMotzi. For those people who recite HaMotzi and Bekat Mazon and matzah all year long, this rule applies to fried matzah as well. Egg matzah and Pesach is matzah akira. It's going to be mezonot, unless you eat 216 grams, because it's flavored bread. Egg matzah is mezonot. Okay, so that is on repurposing of bread. Let's now come back to page 297 in the Tzurba. I know we're skipping back and forth. That's just because the way the halachot are easy, I think in my head, easier to learn. So this topic that we're about to do, we already saw this last week. We saw it a little bit outside. We didn't get into it completely. So this week, we're just going to review it, really. Shulchan Aruch says an interesting idea. We learned last week that if you have bread with a filling inside, a dough with a filling inside, the dough, it becomes mezonot, right? That's what he said. You fill it with almonds, with honey, it becomes mezonot. Then the Shulchan Aruch says, hashtida, which is baked bread, and inside is meat, fish, or cheese, mivarech alav HaMotzi. You make a HaMotzi. 1 second. One place, the Shulchan Aruch said, if you fill it inside, it becomes mezonot. And now he says, you fill it with meat, cheese, or fish, it's going to be HaMotzi. So
Sounds
there's
like
two ways.
Gujah.
What?
Sounds like Gujah.
Right. So this is what we dealt with last week, correct? So the Magen Avraham says, you know what the Shulchan Aruch is teaching us? That the only time, if you make dough with a filling inside, it becomes mezonot if it's sweet. If it's non-sweet, it's going to be HaMotzi. That's the Magen Avraham in source 2. The Taz comes and says, no, that's not what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. When the Shulchan Aruch says you make a HaMotzi on this dough that's filled with meat, cheese, or fish, you know why that is? That's because someone's eating a Suda out of that. Those things are meant to eat a Seudah. And since they're meant to eat a Seudah, they become a HaMotzi. But if they're meant to be eaten as a snack, then they will be mezonot. So even if it's filled with meat, fish and cheese or cheese, according to the Taz, it will remain a mezonot unless it's meant to be eaten as a meal. But if it's meant to be eaten as a snack, it will stay mezonot. Says the Mishnah Brura. Mishnah Brura, source 4, says like Magen Abraham. He says no, if it's filled with meat, fish, or cheese, if it's definitely HaMotzi. But the Hafetz Chaim in his Biur Halacha says that the halacha may be like the Taz. The halacha may be like the Taz. And even if it's filled with meat, fish, or cheese, it will still be mezonot if it was meant to be eaten as a snack. Okay. Again, this you can see is the way the Ashkenazim learned the halacha, that Korea Seudah means you're making a Suda out of the food. The way we learn Kriyat Seudah is if you're eating 216 grams, you're eating a certain amount, not that you want this to be a meal. So what happens here? You have a macholket, Magen Abraham and the Taz. Macholket within the Mishnah Berurah, Biur Halacha, the Chafetz Chaim. So what do? Piskei Tshuvot says, Milamaaseh, Gam Deot Sha'ar Achronim Nechleku Lekan V'Lekan. Piskei Tshuvot says there are achronim that go both ways. Some achronim say if it's filled with fish, meat, or cheese, it's definitely going to be HaMotzi. And some say no, it will remain mezonot. Lachen, therefore, mehanachon lechol yirei hashamayim shelo yachel pat hamemuleh b'basar dagim gmina yirakot b'chadoma el b'shiur kriyot seudah. You should not eat it unless you're eating a seudah out of it, because it's a machloket whether you're supposed to make a HaMotzi or mezonot. So you should eat a whole seudah, or you should eat it after eating regular bread. So the Piskei Tshuvot says it's a machloket back and forth, this way, that way. Therefore, don't eat it without making HaMotzi. Eat regular bread, or eat enough of it to make a HaMotzi. Rabbi Bayomin forced in his Sefer, the laws of Brachot, says the same thing. One who eats a meat pie, one should ever avoid the problem by eating these pies only in the course of a bread meal, or by eating an amount which would warrant HaMotzi. What about Sfaradim? What do we hold? Shulchan Aruch said if it's filled with meat, cheese, and fish, you make a HaMotzi. What did he mean? Did he mean like the Magen Abraham, since it's not sweet, it's HaMotzi? Or did he mean like the Taz, since because you're being Kaveh Suda becomes HaMotzi? So the Ben Ish Chai learns like the Taz. Look at the bolded part on page 301. Says the Ben Ish Chai, V'le Inyan halacha naktinim b'zeh levarach barim minei mezonot u'bracha be'en gimel. De'en levarech bekat hamazon ma'akom safek mishum dimarbe be'berachot. Says the Ben Ish Chai, it's a suffix. If something is filled with meat, fish, or cheese, if it's HaMotzi or mezonot, therefore make a mezonot. Don't make extra brachot. Brachot might be bracha levatala. So the Ben Ish Chai wants to learn like the Taz. But we have the Yalkut Yosef, we have Chacham Ovadia in his Sefer Halichot Olam, and he writes, Pashtida, Hana'aset mebetzak anilush b'mayim, v'ne'efat b'tanur, you have regular bread, u'memilim ota, b'basar, or b'dagim, or gvina, and you fill it with meat, fish, or cheese, mevarach alaya, HaMotzi, u'birkat hamazon. If it's not sweet, it's going to be HaMotzi. Okay, so we who follow Chacham Ovadia are going to say HaMotzi if it's a dough with a filling inside, if it is not sweet. Okay, that was what we spoke about it last week, and now we went through the sources on stuff. Now, what about Varekas, Danishes, Knishes? Varekas, Danishes, Knishes. What's the status of this? So take a look, source 9 on page 302. This is a halacha bura. This is Chacham David Yosef. Chacham David Yosef takes a look. And this, Rabotai, is a big way out of a lot of HaMotzi, to say Mezonot. Listen to this. If you put enough oil in the dough, that the dough is oily. You put enough oil into the dough that the dough is oily, right? What type of dough is this? Pastry dough. Pastry dough, right? You have the, what do they call them? The franks and blanks, right? So you have meat and you have a dough around them. But most time it's a pastry dough. And the pastry dough is flavored. There's a lot of oil. That's why I always say there might be a difference between samsa and gosh gajeh, right? Gosh gajeh is usually made with regular bread dough, right? Now, if the flavor seeps into the bread dough, it can still be mezonot. But if there's no flavor of the meat that goes into the dough, then it's going to be HaMotzi. But samsa is different because samsa they use pastry dough, and pastry dough is a high percentage of oil, margarine, whatever they put inside there. And you see, it's different the way the bread is, the way the cover is. That's why it's always going to be HaMotzi. Always going to be mezonot, correct? Barekas, samelo basar dagma gavina, or yirakas, the potatoes, tofu, all these things. Hadavar tali bebetzek. You have to look at the dough. If it has a flavor that's recognizable in the dough, then it's going to be mezonot. But if you're going to be eating 216 grams of that dough, then it will be a HaMotzi. The imho vetzek also be kemach umayim ve'tamukit 216 grams. You have to eat it within a certain amount of minutes. Every kazayit has to be within 7 minutes, and you cannot wait between kazayites more than 7 minutes. Right. You cannot. You won't say HaMotzi. Right. 27 grams. So says the halacha brura, you have to look at the dough. So that's what we were saying last week about the gosh gajeh. The dough is a flavored dough. So you have regular bread dough, but then you put the meat on it. And while the meat is sitting on it, the meat juices are going into the dough. And now the dough has a flavor, has a recognizable flavor. So the dough is no longer regular dough. It's going to be mezonot. And samsa, where the dough is definitely not a regular dough, it's definitely going to be mezonot unless you're kveya suda on it. Let's take a look. Source 10, the laws of brachot from Rabbi Forst. He says, small frankfurters covered by a thin pastry crust are certainly made eaten as a snack, and they definitely have flavor. All variety of cheese danishes likewise require only mezonot. Cheese danishes, the dough of the cheese danish is definitely flavored. It's not regular bread dough. It has a flavor. It's a milky flavor. It's a cheesy flavor. So it's going to be mezonot. Potato knesh, perhaps made to be eaten primarily as a snack. One should therefore recite a mezonot. Okay. Now, last week we dealt with pizza. Pizza is always a biggie. What's the bracha on pizza? Someone says, "Oh, I heard one slice is mezonot. Oh, 2 slices are HaMotzi." So we're going to see where this comes from, and if this applies to us. He brings from Rabbi Halachot Abrachot. Who is this? Rabbi Pinchas Bodner, who brings from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. That's what he says here. Some establishments need their pizza dough with fruit juice to make sure the morbinim is on. So if you taste that the bread is sweet, if I remember correctly, Malkiel, you'll tell me if you 108th pizza, right? The 108th pizza shop. When I ate there, I felt that the pizza dough was sweet. I don't know if everyone has the same feeling, but when I ate there years ago, the pizza dough was sweet. The dough itself was a sweet dough. in Borough Park, Mendelssohn, the pizza dough is sweet. It doesn't taste like regular dough. So those are mezonot, unless you're eating 216 grams of the pizza dough.
Which is
Then
2
it'll become
slices.
You have to check. I don't know how much one slice is. But if you're eating 216 grams of that sweet pizza dough, it becomes HaMotzi. If it's not, if you're eating less, then it's mezonot. Now, he says further, the bracha requirement of regular pizza dough that's not made with fruit juice, so other pizza shops, can vary from country to country. So now this is the way Ashkenazim learn, right? Kviat Suda is depending, are you eating a meal out of this food or not? If places where people eat pizza for a meal, then you need HaMotzi and benching. Because Ashkenazim say if you're establishing a meal, then it's going to be HaMotzi. Right? So if people eat pizza as a meal, you make HaMotzi. However, where people eat pizza as a snack, then it's Borei Minei Mezonot and Al HaMichya. That's Ashkenazic definition of Kviat Suda. Then he says it's difficult to determine whether pizza is eaten as a snack or a meal. In those cases, you go with what you're doing. If you're eating the pizza now as a snack, it's mezonot. If you're eating it as a meal, then it's hamotzi. That is what Rabbi Bodner says from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Now, we're going to get into that one slice, two slice that a lot of people say. Source 12. Rabbi Chaim Jachter or Hachter, bracha on one slice of pizza. Look what he says. The debate whether the bracha for one slice of pizza is mezonot or motzi hinges on the question, is pizza a meal food or a snack food? Again, this is the way Ashkenazim understand Kviat Suda. Are you eating this piece as a meal or not? Many people recite mezonot on one slice of pizza based on Rav Moshe Feinstein's reported ruling that pizza is pat haba b'kisnin. Rav Moshe is reported to have said that pizza is a type of snack food and it's not a meal. Therefore, one slice is mezonot because it's a snack. Two slices is a meal, it's a motzi. But you should know not every Ashkenazic posek agrees with this. Rabbi Willig rules that a motzi should be cited even on one slice of pizza. It might be because Rabbi Willig holds one slice as a meal. Rabbi Avadia Yosef, we will talk about him in a second. But Yisrael Belsky, right, Sheshiva Torah V'dat, and big posting for the OU, he also said that one slice of pizza is a hamotzi. For Ashkenazim, one slice of pizza is a meal and it's hamotzi. So in by Ashkenazim, it's a machloket what they have to say. Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg and Rav Hershel Schachter also told Rav Chaim Yachter that hamotzi is even for one slice. So there are many Ashkenazic poskim who say for one slice of pizza, for them who say that it all goes on what you're eating, and they're saying that Kviat Suda is if you're making a meal and one slice is a meal. Many Ashkenazim say to say hamotzi even on one slice. The one who do the one or two, that's based on Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe held one slice is a snack, two slices is a meal. What about for us Sfaradim? Very, very simple. For us, it says in the Halichot Olam, Chacham Avadia writes, page 304, V'chein ala pizza yesh levorech hamotzi ubrikat hamazon. You should make hamotzi and brikat hamazon. Elim kain, unless nilusha b'chala v'nikar tam chala b'isa, if it was the bread was made with milk or fruit juice or something that the flavor is now in the dough, then you make mezonot al michya. So for us, it's very simple. You walk into a pizza store and you want to know what should I say on the pizza. Taste the dough. If the dough is sweet, it's mezonot. Unless you're going to eat 216 grams of that, then it'll become hamotzi. But if it's sweet, it's mezonot. If it's not sweet bread, then it's going to be hamotzi. So for us, it's very simple. You just have to know, is it sweet? Is it not? Okay?
Most of the
Page
times
30.
it's not sweet.
If the dough is not sweet,
The
then
crust,
it's going
the outer crust. We learned before that we have to bite it from
yeah,
the
you go by the
Like,
crust.
most of the time, yeah, the crust is usually, I don't know. It's
So
my
that's what I'm
experience.
saying. If I in some places the crust is even sweet. The dough is sweet, so the crust is sweet.
Okay,
It's a sweeter type of pizza. They do it. I know Mendelssohn's is like that, and all the places are like that. If I remember correctly, at 108 used to be, at least to me, it tasted sweet. The crust would taste sweet. Such a case, there will definitely be mezonot, unless you're eating 216 grams. Now you have to figure how much dough is on each slice. Right now, nowadays, the pizza cutter is not even cutting the slices correctly anymore. I get pizzas with slices huge, and the other pieces, I don't know what happened to these Mexicans. They don't know how to cut pizza anymore. Okay, someone's got to give them a crash course of how to make slices. These are the older days. You got a slice, it looked like a slice. Now you have one side huge, the other side small. Okay, 305, and we'll end with this topic. Page 30. Oh yeah, okay, we have two topics. Let's see. One time. Practical cases of flavored dough, page 305. Cake. Cake is mezonot, definitely mezonot. Unless you're eating 216 grams of cake, you know for sure it's mezonot for us. But even by them, even by Ashkenazim, cake it's not something people establish meal. No one says, okay, I'm having dinner, and he pulls out cake and he starts eating cake. They who say it all depends if you're eating a meal, they cannot say that eating cake is a meal. It's not possible. Okay, cake is cake. Croissants are also too sweet. They're not used in place of bread. Soft pretzels. Now, soft pretzels will depend now. For us, it would depend if it's sweet or not. Right? Soft pretzels that they sell in the pizza shops. If it's sweet dough, it's going to be mezonot. If it's bread dough, then it's going to be HaMotzi. Right? That's simple as that. That's the way you figure that out. Okay. He rings over here. This is what we were talking about before, and we'll end with this. The last case. Practical cases of dry, thin foods. Okay, so what's a dry mezonot? So matzah during the year. For us Bukharians, we know non toki, right? You have non toki. It's a bread, regular bread dough. They bake it in a way that it becomes dry, and it's like a cracker. We make a HaMotzi on this. Why is this so? Why is this so? So in the Har Tzvi, or Tzvi Pesach Frank wants to say that they are exempt from the Tiyot Daim because people usually don't establish a meal on them. Usually you eat non toki as a snack, he's saying. You don't establish a meal on it. Now, if you would eat 216 grams of it, you would have to make a HaMotzi, right? Same thing with matzah. Even though matzah we say now is mezonot, you eat 216 grams of it, it's going to be HaMotzi. But he says that this is I believe, an Ashkenazic Sak way of looking at it, that if it's intended to be made as dry and thin, then it's going to be considered a snack, and it always will be mezonot. So in summary, look at that brown box, the beige box on page 307. Rav Frank rules that flatbread crackers should be viewed as a pata baba kisnin for two reasons. They have the form of dry briskets. They don't look like bread, right? No one thinks of non toki as being bread, although the word non usually means bread, right? By the way, what's non toki? How do you translate that? Non means what? Bread. And what does toki mean? You ever have osh toki? What's osh toki? Huh? What is it? No, what's osh toki? What's that? Grape leaves, right? Why is grape leaves? Why is it called non toki? From my understanding, is grape leaves are very thin, right? So when we say non bread, toki is thin. The regular bread is a loaf. It's a big thing. So non toki it's not a grape leaf. So obviously the lashon must be a borrowed lashon. It must be that it's because it's very thin. Okay. So the dough, their dough includes significant quality of flavoring, which is not true for non toki. Non toki doesn't have a lot of flavoring. They do put in cumin I feel that sometimes, but it's not very like, it doesn't have a weird flavor. It tastes like regular bread. It's like regular cracker. It doesn't taste off. So the laws of brachot, Rav Force, he says, hard pretzels. You open a bag of pretzels. Numalkiel, a bag of pretzels. What is it? It's regular dough, and they made it hard, right? So it's a snack food. It's mezonot, like the biscuits. Biscuits and crackers are also mezonot because they're biscuits and crackers. Breadsticks, also eaten like a snack, he says, and they're going to be mezonot. Okay, here comes the question. Toasted bagel and pita chip. This is what everyone was talking about before. Okay, so on page 308 in the Tzurba, source number 17. The bracha of toasted bagel or pita chips is borim minei mezonot, provided that the bagel or pita was made especially for production of toasted chips. However, if the product is made from leftover bagels or leftover pita, then it's going to be HaMotzi. So it all depends. What was it? How was it to be made? Now the OU. So remember, he said Rav Tzadka said, right? Rav Tzion said that Rav Tzadka said that if it was originally made into bread, but the intention was to make it into a pita chip afterwards, it remains it could be a mezonot. Here he brings from the OU that they say that no, it will be a HaMotzi because it stopped in the middle and became bread first. So interesting take. I can understand both sparot, both explanations make sense because Lamaisa, it was bread at one point. Okay, that's an interesting point. We can go with Rav Tzadka's way of learning, and that if it's marketed to be pita chips or toasted bagel chips, they sell them in Costco. If you go to Costco, at least the one here in Lawrence has toasted bagels chips. They're chips, but they're made from bagels, and they put in everything spice on it. Very tasty, very good. So those are mezonot because they're intended to be made this way. The factory is making it this way. Yeah. And then so that's going to be HaMotzi. It's in the restaurant. That's going to be HaMotzi, even if they're making it. It's going to be HaMotzi. According to everyone, it's HaMotzi. Ashkenazim Sfaradim. It's always HaMotzi. Because it was originally bread. I put down here, Yalkut Yosef, page 291, Halacha 24. Bread dough that is baked to dry and crispy like a cracker is pata baba kisnin and is mezonot. If you're making toast out of ordinary bread, then it's HaMotzi. Marketed toast that is produced specifically to be eaten in this form, however, has the status of crackers. So it seems to me that the Yalkut Yosef is learning, like Rav Tzion said, the Rav Tzadka said, that if it's made specifically to become toast, it's going to be mezonot. Unlike the OU, who says that that if it was stopped over as a bread, it will be HaMotzi. Says Vezot Beracha. Similarly, on regular matzah, the custom of Ashkenazim is to recite Bracha of HaMotzi, since it's a meal food. It's not something that you pass by. Again, that's the way they're looking at Kriyat Suda, if you're making a meal out of it or not. The Sephardic custom is to recite Borei Mezonot on Matzah during the rest of the year. They have a basis for this, but it's preferable to eat them only with a meal, so you don't come into a safek. The Yalkut Yosef writes that this as well, and notes that the Chida writes similarly in Machzak Beracha, the one who fears heaven should try to avoid uncertainties and eat matzah during a regular meal. But Mordechai always said you don't have to be strict about this, and you can eat matzah and say mezonot during the year. Halacha 27, and in the Yalkut Yosef, he talks about what about Motzi Pesach, right? We just finished Pesach. Motzi Pesach. What's the halacha of the matzah?
HaMotzi lechem min haaretz.
Until when?
In the morning.
Very good. Why?
Because he still didn't get his chametz back. So technically,
because
that's still
bread is
considered bread for
unavailable.
him.
Most
Right,
bread is unavailable. So what's still bread? Matzah is still bread.
Matzah.
The matzah will be HaMotzi. That's why matzah is still HaMotzi on Motzi Pesach. Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, this is where we're going to end off for today. Be'ezras Hashem, the matzah is still going to be Mezonot. Doesn't change. Next week, we're going to finish off volume 13. Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to be ordering volume 14. I've been trying to get it on a discounted price. I'm not able to. But Baruch Hashem, we have some sponsors. So if anyone wants to sponsor, we already have one sponsor. We'll try to get a few more. We're going to order a bunch of them. Malkiel, I know you probably want a copy. We'll make sure you get one. Be'ezras Hashem. I'm going to order one this week. We'll get them to Queens before Sunday. Be'ezras Hashem. We'll get them there. And I'm going to keep the price to $18. I think that's what we were charging, 18 to 20, whatever it was. If anyone wants to pay that, I appreciate that. And then we're going to try to raise some funds. So I'm buying 10 books, $30 a piece. So I need about $300. I already have a $50 donation. So we're going to try. And I know someone else that can give 100, hopefully. So we'll get them all donated, Be'ezrat Hashem, and we'll get them out. All right, this is where we'll end for today. We have a few more tzugyas in Patav Kisnin, very couple of pages, and we'll move on to volume 14 Be'ezrat Hashem next week. Okay. Laila Tov, Toda Rabba.
Thank you. Thank you, Laila Tov.
Thank you very much. Shavua Tov.